This episode of AC/DC Beyond the Thunder is dedicated to Joel Wortman, family, friend, and fellow AC/DC kindred spirit. Rock in peace, Joel.
You're listening to AC/DC Beyond the Thunder, the podcast with the biggest balls of all. With your hosts, Kurt Squires and Greg Ferguson. It's time to rock.
It's the one and only podcast featuring extraordinary fans who get to salute this extraordinary band, AC/DC Beyond the Thunder, talking with famous actors, authors, athletes, comedians, professors, military war heroes, and in this case, even investment managers. Case in point, Wade Sickler, President and Senior Investment Manager at Sickler Capital LLC from Bozeman, Montana, who doubled down for the chance of a lifetime to receive a one-on-one guitar lesson from none other than Angus Young. How did he pull that off? Well, given that Wade is pretty good with juggling cash, let's just say we could easily title this episode Money Talks. Ladies and gentlemen, we welcome Wade Sickler to AC/DC Beyond the Thunder. Wade, thanks for being here.
Glad to be here. Thank you.
Let me set this up for our listeners. Back at the turn of the century, it was a really good time to be an AC/DC fan. Not only did they release a fun new album called Stiff Upper Lip in February of 2000, but AC/DC were uncharacteristically embracing popular culture like never before. The first time they ever appeared on Saturday Night Live. They were on VH1, Behind the Music. They were on AC/DC Fan Club. And then, almost unheard of, performing live on MTV, or as Brian Johnson declared it, in the hallowed halls of hip hop. And while I was watching, I was watching AC/DC on MTV, and the band are taking questions, and in between playing live, all of a sudden, the MTV host, which was Dave Holmes, cuts to a story of how just a week prior, one fan plunked down a sizable amount of cash to sit down for a guitar lesson with Angus Young. And Wade, that was you.
Yes, it was. And it was a great moment to be there. It was a dream come true. And science fiction writer couldn't make this stuff up.
Tell us about the origin of how that life-changing auction came to fruition.
Well, do you want the short version or the long version?
Let's see where this goes. It was for, what was the charity? Let's start off with that.
It's the Northrop Robbins Musical Institute for Charity. So musical therapy has been shown to demonstrate benefits to people, which makes a whole lot of sense to people who are suffering, severe illnesses. And so the Northrop Robbins Institute for Music, all the money went there. And so it was all for a good cause, but it was a teenage dream of mine, and that was fulfilled. And it took a band like AC/DC to make it happen.
So this is when eBay was in its infancy, and it's an auction online, correct?
Correct. And so I was an AC/DC fan going way, way, way back. So I was a huge AC/DC fan. Everybody knew about it. That was sort of my identity. But I was at the same time a hedge fund manager, which is a complicated term for saying someone who tries to make money on upside and downside of markets. So when word came out of this, I was 34, had a money management firm at that time, but I heard about this AC/DC eBay contest where you could win a guitar lesson with Angus Young. And I'd never had an eBay account.
I remember that. It was in its infancy, and this is around the time of the dot-com bubble as well, right?
It was a dot-com bubble, and it was right at the peak of the dot-com bubble when all this went down. So that created a whole lot of volatility to the whole issue. Word came out, and I was doing well. I grew up in a working class family, didn't have money growing up. I had a baseball glove and a bat and a basketball and a football, so I was happy. Long story short, it's the year 2000, and AC/DC or Elektra Records, who was a record label at that time,
Right.
announced this contest. And so I thought, wow, guitar lesson with Angus. And I've been playing going back 17, 18 years. I've, been sitting in my home, or my parents' home in my bedroom, teaching myself how to play the guitar. And that was back in the days of fast forward, rewind, and pick up the needle and back it up. And I can't tell you how many hours I spent doing that, but it was a daily, nightly regimen. And so I'll fast forward many years later, this AC/DC opportunity presents itself. So I log on to eBay. It's a week-long, bidding
Auction.
Excuse me. See, I don't know the vernacular. And and so for about 5, 6, 7, days, the price remains relatively stable and low. And
Like, what price was it hovering around?
I think it was hovering around 8 or 10,000 for a while.
Okay.
I think it started like 4, 5, 6,000, and then the
Which
final
is pretty
day-
high back then for 2000. That's a chunk of change.
That's pretty high. Yeah, this is March, which is top of the internet bubble, and there's volatility going on crazy. And I'm sitting in front of I'm a computer, and I have in a home office, and I have a money management firm, and I have an assistant there. And so we come to day 7 of the auction, and the price starts going up. And so I'm just feeling my way through this thing.
Right. So you're still trying to figure out eBay and how it works.
Exactly. I was just feeling my way through all this. I really didn't know what's going on. And there was other AC/DC auctions for other prizes there that I was bidding on as well. And I'm just hitting alt tab between the computer stock screen and the eBay screen. So as the morning progressed, the price kept going up, and soon it was 10,000, and it was 11,000, and 12,000, and I'm like, okay, someone out there's bidding against me. I didn't know. We're getting near to the deadline. At the same time, I'm trading stocks. Really wild volatility. I'm shorting. I'm betting on stocks going down. I'm betting on them going up. I'm playing options. I'm selling stuff short.
So there's a little bit of stress going on.
There's a lot of stress going on. I think the eBay contest ended the same time as the market closed on the West Coast, and I can't remember exactly, but it was just crazy. The price kept going up, and I'd raise it, and so I started raising the price, 200 above where it was last, and then that was quickly raised, and then I figured out to raise it 500 above where last, and that was raised, and I learned how to raise it $1,000 above. So as we're getting down to the deadline, looking over my assistant and saying, should I sell short Excite, which was the internet stock at the time, a search engine, or should I buy this? And she said, do both. So follow your gut, she says. Well, your gut is always right. This guy kept raising the price, going up 18,000 to 20,000, 22,000, 24,000.
Wow.
And it just kept going up, and I put in a bid for like 27,000, and someone bid 28,000. And
oh my God.
And I'm trading stocks at the same time. I said, fuck it. And I put in a bid for $40,000.
What?
With 30 seconds or a minute to go.
$40,000?
40,000. I said, I looked over to my assistant, who's awesome. I said, we're going to do this right. Fuck it. And so I thought, let's just see what he's, how committed he is. And and so he stopped at 28,000 apparently his bid, and I got it for 28.1.
Oh my God, that's insane. That's insane. I got to ask now, whose money were you bidding with? Was that your clients or your own money?
Oh, completely my own money, of course.
Okay, just to make sure. So after you won, what happened? Did you get a contact from someone immediately?
After I won and the bidding stopped and then the market closed, I looked over my assistant and I said, "Did that just happen?" And then like a couple minutes later, I got a call from Elektra Records, and he said, "Congratulations, you won. You won on this other thing too. I don't want this to come across wrong, but I just want to make sure you can pay for this."
Yeah, pay up, buddy. How much?
Yeah. And so we talked a little bit, and then the phone rang about 3-4 minutes later, and it was MTV calling.
Okay.
They were with AC/DC down in the Virgin bookstore at the time.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah, they were down there at the bookstore at the time, right down there in Times Square. So I've been there a lot, and suddenly I'm live on MTV.
Wow.
And
With AC/DC?
with AC/DC. So I'm on live with them, and they're asking me questions, and I respond back to them. And the band is, just talking, and it's another surreal episode. I'm a stock guy. The market's going crazy. I just bought a lot of stuff on eBay, and it's going for a good cause. Don't get me wrong, but it's like this is all sort of like dizzying.
Right.
So yeah, I'm on the phone with them. They're talking about the new album Stiff Upper Lip, and Angus chimed in last. Doing the marketing bit. That's the title song of the album.
Right.
And so we talk for a while, and we hang up, and I look over at my assistant again, like, did that just happen? I grew up in a working class family.
And you just spent $28,000 for a guitar lesson.
For a guitar lesson, but it was still surreal. This is actually happening.
Wow.
And I'm talking to Angus Young over the phone with MTV. The market had closed. This is all that happened. And then I went about my day, and then wake up the next morning. And I'm an early morning riser, always have been because of this, the market stuff. And the phone rings at 5 a.m. I pick up the phone, and it's a radio station. Heard about the news, read about the news. They want to interview me.
Okay.
So I talked with them, and then I hung the phone down, and then the phone rang again. And the phone kept ringing off the hook. And then it went on and kept going all day long. And this kept going on and on and on, because I was supposed to, I'm flying out to meet AC/DC the next week. And so I'm giving all these radio interviews. And that in itself became a big, time-consuming task, an enjoyable one.
Right.
Which I would have radio producers calling me up and saying, okay, we would like you to play the guitar for us.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah.
How fun.
That was fun. So I would, I had a speakerphone, landline days and everything else, and I would sit on the floor and then start playing songs on the radio for requests. And some of these radio stations were like, syndicated, big radio stations. So I don't know who else playing them, but a lot of radio stations.
Right. Your 15 minutes of fame have started.
Yeah. I never sought it. I never cared about it. I just I was a big AC/DC fan. And suddenly I'm going to go jam with them and get a guitar lesson from Angus. And that's all I cared about. So harking back, literally I grew up in a small town in Montana. And when I was 9 or 10, visiting some relatives, I heard someone playing the 12-bar blues on the acoustic guitar. And I was captivated. So fast forward 3-4 years or so, and I'm back home, and my parents have a guitar. I pick up the acoustic guitar and start playing the 12-bar blues. I just love it, and I'm not doing it correctly. I'm not doing it right. I don't have the feel, the sound right, and all that stuff. But it just continues to morph and morph and morph. And then I'm 15, and I buy the album Hard Again by Muddy Waters and Johnny Winter.
Oh. One of my favorites.
And I hear Manish Boy, and off that, whoa, da 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 da, and
so good.
I'm in love. I'm in love with the blues, and
so good.
Fast forward, rocking out to AC/DC, the rock and roll blues, George Thorogood, Stevie Ray Vaughan. I cannot tell you how much joy that has brought to me.
Well, that album alone, I don't know if you knew this, but Malcolm Young referenced that album, Hard Again by Muddy Waters, as the sound he was trying to capture for Flick of the Switch. He loved that album so much. So that's cool you bring that up.
I didn't know that story, but I will say Flick of the Switch is one of the most unheralded and underrated rock albums of all time. When Flick of the Switch came out, and they had recorded a couple of albums, 3 albums with Mutt Lange, and for those of us that rock was an arduous process. They just wanted to simplify it and down to the bare bones, which they did. and that album is just immense. I cannot tell you how many times I played. I roll out. I wore out albums and cassettes to that album, and it's just amazing. So, if you go back to the album and hear Brian scream his lungs off at the end to Landslide or Brain Shake or whatever, that's just incredible. It's like the Switch came out when I went to my first AC/DC concert. I had to drive 700 miles with a friend to see it.
I was gonna say, because you're from Montana, so it's not easy to be an AC/DC fan if you live in Montana, right? I mean, you're traveling distances to go see these guys.
Yeah, it's a tough bill. Back to the old days, records would be delivered to the music store on Tuesday.
Yeah.
So I knew everybody in the town who had a record store. They knew to call me as soon as the album came in when new AC/DC records came out.
Cool.
I lived in Bozeman, Montana. I learned later, that AC/DC had played in Billings, 2.5 hours away, opening for Ted Nugent.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah, that's another story. But I'd have to drive, with friends long distances from Bozeman to Denver to Spokane to Casper, Wyoming.
Wow. You traveled to all those places to go see AC/DC?
Yeah, there was no doubt about it. AC/DC is coming to tour around, and I would go to see them and drive all night, drive all the way back.
Wow. So you're a committed AC/DC fan and traveling distances. So traveling to Manhattan was to go play with your hero is just must have been just so mind-boggling for you. So tell us about that day. How did it go down? They put you up in a hotel?
No, I put myself up in a hotel, and
Oh my God. They figured you could afford it.
Yeah, flew out there in style, stayed there in style, and got there a couple days early in advance of it, and a new CD came out. So I'm sitting in this suite in Manhattan, and I brought out my guitar and a small amp that I could play on.
Okay.
And so I'm teaching myself all these songs off the new CD.
Fun.
And the gal I brought out at the time saying, let's go, see the city. And we did that a little bit, but I'm like, no, I've got to learn this stuff. I was told that someone would come pick us up, an MTV production crew.
Oh, fun.
Went down to the lobby, meet with these guys. They interviewed me on in a cab ride to the studio that AC/DC was practicing at. And then we walked in. Again, it's kind of surreal.
Yes.
I'm about to meet AC/DC. Backing up just a little bit more, when I was in high school, I'd say to friends, I was the big AC/DC guy. I didn't have a mullet. I was a bus boy, at JB's Big Boy. And I played a lot of sports. I was playing sports all the time. I wanted to be a professional athlete, and then I realized that's just not going to happen. Here I am walking into this studio. So there's all these people hanging outside the studio, and you hear the band practicing. Because they're going to go on to MTV, as you alluded to before. They're coming out now at the urging of the record label. And they talked about this. They need to come out of their shell just a little bit. I know Angus and Malcolm don't like to do interviews.
Correct.
All this stuff that they would never do before, even though they're still a secretive band, which lends to their mystery.
Right.
And so I'm standing outside the studio, and all these people are out there with cameras and microphones. And so they open the door in the studio. This is a kid, who grew up, who was 15, 16, wore his Angus Young outfit for Halloween.
Yeah, it's a dream come true. I can only imagine.
And, stepping into this big studio, and the band's all there, and MTV is recording this, and other stations are recording this, other networks are recording this, and I'm meeting Angus Young, and he gives me a cherry red, Gibson SG. It's a signature color and all that stuff. I had brought my Gibson SG that I bought when I was 17.
And when you said he gives you, he literally gives it to you?
He opens the case, and he picks up the card and says, "This is for you." And I'm like, you've got to be kidding me.
That's incredible. So and they're probably psyched that you are not just a real fan, but also you could play guitar.
They didn't know if whoever won the contest was a real fan or not, or just some rich guy who was trying to stroke his ego.
Right, right.
Showed up, could speak English, much less play the guitar.
True.
So I asked him some questions in front of some cameras. They prompted me for some questions to ask him. And then Angus and I moved over to a couple of stools, and there was a guitar technician there who plugged me in, started playing back and forth, and Angus goes, if you're more comfortable playing your guitar that you brought. I said, I brought my guitar. It's not a cherry red one
Yeah.
like you frequently play on. So I put down the guitar that he gave me and started playing my own guitar.
Cool.
And then we started trading off riffs. We're sitting on two stools. There's, a drum kit, speakers, and everything else are sitting around.
And it's just Angus. All the other guys cleared out.
All the other guys clear out and they're back in the room with the media.
Okay. And you said being an investment manager is a highly stressful gig, but this must have been extremely stressful for you.
This was stressful, but the first thing I did when we sat down with Angus was to start playing Meltdown.
Oh, cool. And Angus leans over and goes, "No, you're playing that wrong, right?"
No, he did. He smiled. I was playing it correctly.
That's great.
That doesn't mean I don't play a lot of stuff incorrectly there, but I was playing it correctly. He just smiled at me. His eyes lit up.
Oh, that's fun.
We moved then from chord lessons to everything else to just start playing songs off the new album back and forth.
Wow. He must have been psyched that you had learned that already.
I can't speak for Angus. He didn't know what he was getting himself into.
Sure.
But a real fan showed up playing their songs.
Wow.
And so then I started playing Can't Hold Me Back.
Oh, love that song.
Love that song. Great boogie beat song. Just love it.
Yes.
And Brian walks over, picks up the mic, and leans into me. And Brian starts singing the song.
Oh, wow. Now that's surreal, man.
That's surreal. Brian's leaning into me, singing the song. To go on to learn, Brian's a really gregarious, friendly, super sweet guy.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. And Phil jumped on the drums.
Oh, too much, man. You were Malcolm.
I was Malcolm at the time. I'm a poor boy's Malcolm.
Well, I wouldn't use the word poor.
No, but I'm just trying to do my best to imitate the late great Malcolm.
Right.
And then we're playing different AC/DC songs like Whole Lot of Rosie, new songs off the album, Highway to Hell. And when we got to the solo to Highway to Hell, okay, let me just back up a little bit. So playing in a lot of bands growing up, it's kind of stressful when you're playing with a new bunch of guys they haven't played with before.
Mm-hmm.
Fast forward many years, and here I am sitting on the stool across from Angus Young, and the band is playing, and Brian is singing, and I'm playing with them.
How fun is that? Wow.
It's crazy. You know what the thing is, though, is you play with a lot of different bands. There's usually something off. The drummer's a little off tempo. The bass player's not, locked in or whatever else. Those guys were airtight.
I bet that's what makes that band an amazing band, because everyone says how simple AC/DC is, but you try to replicate AC/DC, there's something about their tightness and their ability to just play in the pocket. It's just, and you're there front row, literally playing in the band. You saw it firsthand.
Yeah, they're just locked in, and particularly with Phil on the drums, it's so when you have that phenomenal bass built in, bass of the ingredients of a great rock and roll band, then you can grow from there. So that allows Angus to do his voodoo, do his magic. But a lot of bands don't even get to that point to grow from.
No.
I was just trying to, keep up with them. So they made it easy for me. We were playing the Highway to Hell. This may seem kind of audacious. So when we got to the guitar solo part of Highway to Hell, I motioned Angus and with my finger, right finger, pick finger, back to myself, I'll play it. And I started playing the solo for, Highway to Hell.
Oh, wow. You took Angus's job. I love it.
Yeah. I think it was that kind of audacity that allowed me to get there in the first place.
He probably loved it. Yeah. He's like, oh, wow, this guy's got some balls. I love it.
Yeah. Big balls. It takes big balls to sit across from Angus and play the guitar back and forth. He was looking at the neck and my fingers, studiously. Of course, I didn't do half justice of what he would do. At the end of the song, there's a tremolo playing that I was doing wrong, and he showed me how to do it correctly. So I learned a bunch.
So it was truly a lesson. I love it. Yeah, that's cool.
It was truly a lesson.
Yeah. And so, how long did this experience last from start to finish? And can you break it down for us in dollars and cents per hour?
Um, I can't break that down. It was 28-1 to do that. I spent a bunch of money flying there and back.
Oh, right. You got to add that in.
And there was another auction to be present for the Total Request Live that MTV, that Angus and the band were going to play on.
Right.
I won a spot for that. That was a couple more $1,000.
Oh, okay.
So I bid on that as well. And then when I showed up, they said, the record label guy said, we were just going to give that to you, anyway.
I know. It's like, might as well throw that in anyway.
so there was another couple thousand that went to a good cause.
Very good. So you said you've never been an autograph guy, but you must have gotten that SG signed, right?
I've never been an autograph guy. I've never asked a person for an autograph in my life. But I knew that I had to get my, SG that I've had since I was 17 that I bought used. And I knew Angus would do his signature and Devil Schoolboy outfit thing that he would do.
Oh, he drew the little caricature too?
He drew that too.
And where's that guitar today?
That guitar today is locked away very securely. But it's the only guitar that I play these days.
Oh, that's fun.
I've been playing on the same guitar since I was 17.
I remember seeing a segment on CNN, and it had mentioned you had plunked down 28,000 for this lesson with Angus for a good cause, and it mentioned that you were busboy turned money manager at 34 years old from Seattle, and which was a pretty impressive amount of cash back then. But it also had like a little few sound bites from Angus, and he said something like, he knows a lot of our songs or something like that. And I think he told CNN that, he taught you a few party tricks or something like that. Do you remember any other quotes?
That quote, he said, yeah, he knows his stuff. He knows the cool licks. I'm trying to show him a few little party bits. And and he did show me some cool stuff that that when you're listening to the album, you just can't pick up. But like, I can't stress this enough. If you're a sports fan, when you sit front row, you see stuff that you just ordinary humans, can't do. I've sat in front row at NBA games and tennis matches and everything else, but sitting in front row with Angus Young he makes such amazing sound and riffs look easy.
Yeah, it's almost like it reminds me of B.B. King. He's just got that sound that you know who it is immediately.
He has a distinctive sound, and so exactly, literally when the moment an AC/DC song comes on, that is AC/DC.
Yes, there are a lot of imitators out there that do a very good job of imitating AC/DC.
And they try, but there's a lot of great guitars, but no one else can replicate them. No one else can produce the magic like Malcolm and Angus. And people can try, whether it's Slash or Ted Nugent or whatever, no one else can replicate it.
No, it's got that great vibrato sound. And that saying, you never meet your heroes, but I think in this case, it's safe to say that no one would be disappointed meeting Angus and Malcolm Young. They're just such down-to-earth guys, and the whole band for that matter. And you had mentioned something to me that Malcolm was watching you play with Angus, and Malcolm said, Angus looks more stressed out than you are. And what did you say?
There's a warning, never meet your heroes. But if your heroes are AC/DC, you're going to be pleasantly surprised.
You're safe.
You're safe. They're so down to earth. They are such good guys. And I would meet, at meet and greets, different record label people said, these guys haven't changed in 25, 30 years. I mean, they're the same guys. They're from a working class family, and they worked their butt off. They earned it the hard way, the old-fashioned way, by touring, and they're the same guys. They'll bend over backwards to accommodate to make their good fans happy, and that's not just in the meet and greet or whatever, but like that's Angus on stage. Not only does he love it, but he's like working his tail off to entertain the
Still,
fans, not because he needs to. It's because he loves it, but he's literally doing it because he sincerely cares what the fans think. It's a big difference
it
between just
really
going out
is.
there doing it for money and doing it because you feel an obligation to give the people what they paid for. So after this guitar lesson and everything else, I'm sitting there with Angus doing his interviews, and Malcolm, who's behind the cameras in the corner of the studio, says, "Hey Angus, he's less nervous than you are." And I looked over at Angus and I said, "I drink battery acid every morning. This is easy."
They must have loved that response.
He must have. He looked at me like, "Huh?" He must have not got a frame of reference. So the battery acid reference was to bigger speech was to I'm in a money management business. I manage hedge funds. It's really
Right.
intensely stressful.
And how long did that session last?
We were there for an hour and a half, a couple hours.
Oh, that's great. I was gonna say if it was 20 minutes, I'd be like bummed out a little bit, but yeah, that's a good chunk of time. So let's fast forward to AC/DC on MTV Live in their studio following that guitar lesson. Angus and the boys were being interviewed by the VJ and classically dodging questions like, "Who are you listening to now?" And I think they asked Korn, Limp Bizkit, like bands like that. And Angus says, "The Rolling Stones," which is a classic statement. And I think the last contemporary guitar player that Angus ever admitted listening to was, quote, "that guy who just died from Texas," which turned out to be Stevie Ray Vaughan.
I
So,
love
but
Stevie Ray Vaughan.
oh, I know. Who doesn't love that guy? But then I see that you're actually there on TV at the MTV studios and they feature your segment with the band and the price tag that came along with it. And you said that you had to rob a lot of 7-Elevens to pay for it. But you said, quote, "Don't tell the band, but I actually would have paid a whole lot more," which is pretty funny. Pretty funny because that was a large chunk of change.
If I could take it back, I would have exchanged that phrase to saying the band was amazing. They were terrific. They made it.
Yeah.
They were awesome. They made it every penny's worth.
That sounds like New England type of sense of humor, so I got it 100%. And you said something you'd love to have them play your birthday party or something. You'd like to fly them out.
At the end of all the cameras and the interviews and everything else, I said to them, "Look, this is about as good as it gets for a fan. You really cannot draw or write this up. This is
Right.
good as it gets for a fan." Told the guys I'll fly them out and they do birthday parties. I'll fly them out the whole 9 yards. And Angus sort of smiled. So you're sitting across from Angus Young cracking jokes like that. And
Right.
so Angus sort of smiles, but he gets it.
You wanted to keep the party going. I get it. I get it. And it's cool that you were, I mean, not only did you get to play with them, but then you get to sit in the MTV studios and watch AC/DC play live, which has never happened before, never will again. And they played Stiff Upper Lip, which was a brand new song. And then there was some sort of online vote between Dirty Deeds, Highway to Hell, and Back in Black, right?
Correct.
For the second song, they ended up playing Back in Black. Is that right?
They ended up playing Back in Black, and Brian says, "Ooh, that's a hard one." And because, Brian is a good sport, but it's hard to be a lead singer for AC/DC. You have to reach.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so they played that.
A lot of
and
words in that
so-
one.
A lot of words in that one. And so it was right there. And again, it's another whole surreal experience.
So what? So the aftermath. You leave New York City. You have these amazing experience. Your 15 minutes of fame. What was the aftermath for you after that? How did you get more dates? Were people coming out of the woodwork, gold digging you?
I had follow-up radio interviews and TV stations. Seattle were interviewing me. They come to my house.
Yeah.
So they were going on tour then. And I was given some contact information. I said, "I'd like to go see this show. Can you help me out with this?" He forwarded me the email address to their assistant tour manager. He's the big guy that you see in a lot of pictures with
Oh yeah.
Angus.
Yeah, he's like 7 feet tall.
He's huge. He's a sweetheart. And so, but you don't want to mess with him. And so Angus,
Right.
which being 5'2.5", he has this big guy overlooking him, and so it looks really disparate. But and so I emailed him, and he said, "Well, I've been expecting your email, so you're taken care of. Whatever show you want to go to, just email me, and we'll take care of it." From then on out,
Wow. You got the golden ticket, man.
I had the golden ticket,
Oh my God. That's amazing.
and so from then on out, I just made a regiment when they're on tour to go see every Saturday night AC/DC show in the U.S. or Canada.
Wow. So you've been bitten by the bug. You can't get enough of it.
I can't get enough of it, and I went to a whole lot of AC/DC shows. And all this time, I'd meet a lot of friends, AC/DC fans who are traveling around to see the bands. So I met a lot of
Yes.
good friends, and we're still friends to this day. Roger Lee, if you're out there, Roger to the Dodger.
There's like an AC/DC fan hall of fame somewhere. There's like 25 core fans that everyone knows, isn't there?
It's just really, really fun. I lived a teenager dream where I could, go play and jam with this band and then follow them around on tour and then, arrange meet and greets with, AC/DC cover bands, House Bells, which is pretty much the first female cover band.
Yeah, great band.
They started with Om as lead singer, Om Johari, and Nancy as a guitarist.
Okay.
You want to hear another crazy story? I introduced them to the band at a backstage show. So House Bells, was going strong, doing well, and they're still doing well. So there's a lot of struggling bands out there that just can't, they're struggling to pay the bills. But House Bells is out there making good money. Anyway, I get a call from one of the gals in House Bells. This is back in 2003, I think it is. And AC/DC is about to launch, a European tour. Turns out Malcolm had tracked them down and asked them if they want to be the opening act for them on their European tour.
You're kidding me.
No.
Wow.
So they were in Canada at the time touring. They couldn't do it because they didn't have all their passports in order.
Oh my God.
I would have loved to have seen House Bells opening up for AC/DC.
Yeah, I mean they're you're right. They're an amazing band. I actually did see them in Seattle and I was very impressed with them as players, and they played some great deep cuts. And as a fan, that's what you want to hear, because you always hear pretty much the same songs, the classic AC/DC songs, when you go to a traditional AC/DC show. But the tribute bands, they can pull out those deep cuts, and they did. They were great.
They were awesome. And it just keeps going and going. Through Facebook and everything else, I've got to meet a lot of other really diehard AC/DC fans. And this wouldn't happen unless, Angus and Malcolm and the guys were welcoming, with open arms, their diehard fans. And that's just
Right.
one part of why, they've remained successful to this day.
They're fans. Yeah, they get it. Think about someone like yourself who's, you've received a bachelor's in political science, pre-law at Montana State, doctorate at Seattle University of Law, and then also became a professor. And you're just a straight up AC/DC fan. It's pretty. It just goes to show you how AC/DC's influenced so many different, diverse people from socioeconomic backgrounds around the globe. It's kind of fascinating, which is what Beyond the Thunder is all about. Do you ever bring up AC/DC questions in class?
I would bring up favorite references, and if someone and some people get it and some people don't.
Right.
I did the money management stuff. Angus refers to me as a stockbroker, which is like an easy thing to use. I'm not a stockbroker, but like if you go to ACDC show, there's a very wide demographic
Sure.
of people there. There are people there who are young, who are learning it, and there are people who are literally in a wheelchair. And
Right.
so there's people across all sections. But I will not forget, this sort of stuck in my mind. This is Stipper Lip Tour, and it was Detroit. And I saw, there's a couple of gals who are probably, 18 or 20, walking out. They're saying, "I've never seen anything like that.
That's great.
That is just amazing. I've never seen anything like that."
Generational now.
A generational amount. But if you've been to a lot of shows, but you haven't seen an AC/DC show, you've never seen anything like it because they weren't manufactured in a studio. So AC/DC in the studio is a real deal. And so when you see the live show, it's pretty much what you heard on the album. That was rare 20 years ago. And now it's even more rare. But that's the only way AC/DC will ever record an album.
Right. Yeah, old school.
Old school.
And so you attended a lot of these meet and greets, and you had mentioned at one point I think you were in Chicago, and you said you were talking with Brian Johnson until the place shut down. Is that correct?
Yeah, the place shut down. Brian was there, and Cliff and Phil were there, and Angus was there for a short term. Phil and Cliff, they're really great guys. They're not really, talkative a lot, but Brian is.
Right.
Brian is the speaker of the band. So there's like professional athletes there and famous people there and everything else. And, Brian's engaging all of them and cracking jokes like, I'm so old I have to take a half of Viagra to keep from pissing down my leg. And everybody congregates around Brian, and he drinks white wine. And then they figured out that I drink red wine, so they'd keep red wine stocked at the meet and greets.
You're like the sixth member of the band now.
Everybody just left the building. So I was talking with Brian, and it just kept going on and on and on after the show. And then some guy came and said, "Brian, we have to go. The bus is leaving." I say, okay. And then I start walking out. I'm looking for the exit. I'm walking down all these halls, and I walk in sort of like the arena area, and there's nobody there. There's no one anywhere. And then I finally found the front doors, and I look at my watch, and it's like 2 a.m.
Wow.
And so I spent a couple hours talking with Brian, and we're just chit-chatting, and he's a very friendly, fun guy.
It sounds like your money has paid for itself at this point. You know, it was a good investment.
When during that MTV Total Request Live thing, and Angus says on there, it was a good investment. And that was the best investment of my life, without question.
Well, Wade, it has been a pleasure to finally catch up with you and all these years later and meet an AC/DC fan where no dollar value is too great to celebrate this magic thing we call AC/DC. And thanks for putting your money where your mouth is. Instead of Money Made, we're going to call this episode Money Wade. We'll leave you with one final question. One final question we ask all of our guests. If you had to describe AC/DC in one word, what would it be?
Energy.
AC/DC Beyond the Thunder theme song, Trailer Trash, written and performed by Gannon Arnold. VO talent by Bruce Jacobson. Cinematography and sound recording by Greg Ferguson. Edited and mixed by Eric Keel. Written, directed, and hosted by Kurt Squires. Produced by Greg Ferguson, Eric Keel, and Kurt Squires. AC/DC Beyond the Thunder is a Squires LLC current motion production. Copyright Beyond the Thunder podcast. All rights reserved. This has been a Nat Attack presentation. Shazbot. Nanu Nanu.